Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. I'm an AP psychology tutor. I've been tutoring this subject since more than 10 years now. In today's class, we will do MCQ practice for the first module of AP psychology, of course, as per the latest curriculum. So, we are going to go over interaction of heredity and environment. As you know, the first unit is biological basis of behavior, and this is the first module under that. I do follow Myers AP Psychology textbook for my course. So definitely this module is as per the Myers textbook. The content on which these questions are based is from the Myers textbook. The questions are not the official Myers questions. I just want to make that clear right at the beginning. So what we do in my classes is after every module, we do a practice of about 15 MCQs, which includes research methods questions, data interpretation questions, and of course, application questions. So that is what I'm going to take you through in this session. And of course, we do practice the Myers official textbook questions also, but that I'm not taking up today. Also, I strongly recommend that you do follow a modular approach, especially in the new syllabus has become all the more important because when you follow modular approach, you do regular practice. The latest syllabus is all about applying your concepts, unlike the previous syllabus. It's not about your vocabulary only. It is about application of the vocabulary. So you need thorough practice if you're going to follow only the review books, like only the review books throughout the course, then you're going to have to wait for every unit to end before you can do practice, and I don't feel that is suitable. You need to practice every module which is within the unit, every small section you have to pick up and practice. So review books are review books. They are meant to be used towards the end once you've completed all the modules over the course. I strongly recommend you don't use them as your main reference. So throughout the year, keep on referring to the Myers official book, and towards the end, you can refer to any of the wonderful review books that are there. Barron's review book is highly updated and highly recommended, or even, of course, Princeton Review is a very good review book. Okay, so in today's class, as I told you, we'll be going over the MCQs. As we go over them throughout the video, I'll keep on giving you tips, techniques, strategies of how to answer. Right at the beginning, though, I want to give you a general approach on how to answer your MCQs. Whenever I ask students about how they've learned to answer MCQs in their schools, they talk about process of elimination. So I think all of you are familiar with that. But I like to add two more steps to that. So in my opinion, how you should answer MCQs, and this works very well with students. Step 1. Whenever you see an MCQ question, without looking at the response choices, try to answer the question yourself. So as simple as just cover the response choices with your hand and read the question. Don't cheat and answer on your own. Or nowadays, you have the digital platform on which you're practicing, so just put a mask, just put a cover over the response choices and try to answer yourself. Then uncover the response choices, remove your hand from the response choices and see whether the answer which you have thought of is indeed there in the response choices. Think of how much confidence that will give you. You already know what the answer is, and there it is in front of you in the response options. So you'll be very confident that it is the right answer. Next, of course, process of elimination. Once you've tried to answer independently, and now that you have the response choices in front of yourself, now start ruling out the wrong answers to just make doubly sure that the answer in your mind is the correct one. And finally, review. The last step is review. After you have narrowed down to one response choice, just think once again of does it truly fit what is being asked in the question, and if it does, you can be fully sure that you've selected the correct answer. Then move on to the next. I know this sounds like too much. It sounds like, oh my god, I have to spend so much time on every MCQ, this is going to take a lot of time. This is the advice for practice, not for how you have to answer in the final paper. In the final paper, you have to be quick. You do have about 80 seconds per MCQ, which is ample time. You can do all of this. But still, by the time the final paper comes, you're so confident in your responses that maybe for one or two questions, you'd have to go about this way. Most of them you'll be able to answer just by quickly, marking the correct choices. This is recommended for practice. So yes, during practice you have to take more effort. It is hard work, but it's totally worth it because that is what will bring you your 5 in your final answer. So keeping in mind this general process, I will not always follow it. I don't have that much time for a video to, it will become very long. But I hope you keep on following that as we go over the questions. So as you go over this video, I strongly encourage you to practice actively. Pause the video after I read out a question. Take advantage of the pause feature. As I told you, cover the answers which are there before I can give out the answers or before you can see the response choices. Cover them. Think of the correct answer. Then resume the video. See whether the answer that you are thinking of is matching with mine or not. So if you take it in that spirit, I think you'll learn a lot from this video. If you just keep on watching what I'm doing and just keep on listening passively, it won't give you that much of an advantage that active involvement will give you. So I want to encourage that right at the beginning. Okay, having said that, let's begin with the first question. And I presume that you know the content already. I'm not going over the content in this video. Okay, they are telling us questions 1 through 3 refer to the following scenario. So this is your typical AP Psychology MCQ. They're going to club about 3 questions together which are coming from the same research situation. So first you need to read the research situation. Annotation is possible now since you have the Blue Book exams. Make use of annotation. I will be making use of it as well. Whenever you read a stimulus, from which they're going to ask you multiple questions of MCQs, highlight the key points which make it easy to keep referring back to the situation and answering. This is good practice for your AAQs also. Right now you have mini scenarios in front of you. In AAQ, you're going to have the full scenario in front of you. So this highlighting, annotating, you can carry forward to the AAQs also. They'll be all the more useful there. Okay, I'm reading out the situation. A research team is interested in the heritability of leadership aptitude. This is what I'll mark first. This is the key objective, or this is the dependent variable of interest, leadership aptitude. So I've just highlighted that. They gather a large sample of participants that includes identical twins raised together, identical twins raised apart, fraternal twins raised together, and fraternal twins raised apart. Large sample, some detail about the participants, possibly. I don't know. There can be a question on the participants, so let me highlight that also. It looks useful. Whatever looks useful, I should just mark that. And let me mark the 4 conditions that are there, or the 4 comparisons which are being drawn. So identical twins raised together, raised apart, fraternal twins raised together, raised apart. So there are 4 conditions in this situation. Each participant completes a standardized assessment measuring leadership skills. So here I see some operationalization of the DV, how they have measured leadership aptitude or leadership skills is through some standardized assessment. Okay, I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I hope you have done unit 0 also before this. I didn't take up unit 0 today because I wanted specific content to be discussed in this video. But you will be able to answer these questions successfully only if you know unit 0, because you have to apply research method skills here. So this MCQ practice, if you're already finding it a little challenging, you're not able to relate with what the situation is and what type of questions are, please just recap unit 0 and module 1.1 of unit 1 and then come back to this video. Whenever you read a research question, before moving on and looking at the questions that are being asked from the situation, just in your mind, in your own language, in your own understanding, just speak out to yourself what the situation was about. Make sure you've understood it before you come to the questions. Again, this is one skill which will really help you in answering the AAQ as well. So ask yourself, have I understood what they have said here? No point of moving forward without understanding. Also, don't make haste. It's not very helpful. In the sense that, don't be rushed about time. Oh, I have only 80 seconds and now so much time is going in reading this situation. Don't worry, time is plenty. you feel like a lot of time is going just because you're under the pressure of time. Actually, it doesn't take that much time to read. So relax, read carefully, understand and answer. What is the point of saving time if you're going to give the wrong answers later? So first make sure you know the right answers, and then only, means you've understood fully, then only come to answering the questions. Okay, otherwise you'll end up wasting time or regretting later when you mark something and you're unsure, and that increases your stress. Better than that, you read carefully first really and answer. It'll give you a boost of confidence to answer better what is coming up later. Okay, so in my words, what I would say is they are telling you that they are measuring leadership aptitude by doing a typical twin study. So they are comparing monozygotic or identical twins who share 100% of their genes with fraternal or non-identical twins who share only about 50% of the genes. As in a typical twin study, if they are able to establish that monozygotic twins share leadership aptitude more strongly than dizygotic twins, they will be able to say that leadership is heritable to a great extent. That is what they are trying to achieve here. Now, one more comparison that comes into the picture is they are also checking whether these twins have been raised together, means they have been brought up in the same homes, or they have been brought up apart. They are checking that also. Why are they doing that? To see whether shared family environment also has an influence. That also becomes very evident. So, like in a typical twin family type of study in which they compare whether twins are being brought up in their own homes or other homes, so that they can control for the influence of environment or the family. That element is also there in this study. Ultimately, they're using a very good tool, a standardized assessment of leadership skills, so that they can establish the concordance for leadership. To what degree leadership is found in twins raised together or raised apart, they are establishing with the help of very good objective techniques. This is my understanding of what the situation is here. When you're trying to understand it, your way of thinking about it could be a little different in your own words. Doesn't matter, as long as you're understanding, that is key. So check your understanding before answering these research scenario type of questions. Let's look at the first question now. Okay, remember what I have told you, cover the answers and only read the question first. If you've forgotten about that, just do that. As I told you previously, you can also make use of some of the features on your digital devices. Like for example, as simple as these response choices are there, mask them like this. Read the question, think of what the response can be, and after you've thought of the response, remove the mask and see whether the answer you have thought of is there amongst the choices or not. Okay, right now I'm not doing that, but I hope you will practice in that way. Like I told you, I just have to be quick with this lesson. Here they're telling us in the first question, the researchers find that leadership aptitude scores of identical twins raised apart are more highly correlated than the scores of fraternal twins raised together. So what they found is in condition 2, the leadership aptitude is much more shared, has much more concordance than in condition 3. The numbering I'm doing according to what I did in the scenario. The finding most strongly suggests that, okay, before looking at the response choices, if you've understood twin studies well, I think this is very obvious. This is like an easy mark that you can get. They're identical twins, their genes are 100% the same. They've been raised apart. Still, there is good concordance between their leadership aptitudes. So, what does that mean? It means that leadership aptitude to a great extent genetic, because despite being raised in different family environments, despite having different experiences, they are tending to share their leadership. What is common between them? Genetic similarity. 100% genes are shared. To make that point even stronger, they have given us a comparison also. When it comes to fraternal twins who don't share 100% of their genes, even if they are raised together, even if they're in the same environment, same experiences, they don't share their leadership aptitude as strongly. So that is further hint that genes really matter. So of course I can't know the exact wording that they must have used in the response choices, but it is going to be something like heredity has a stronger influence on leadership rather than experiences or the environment. That is going to be the conclusion. So once I've thought of this answer in my mind, now I can check the response choices. As I said, the wording can't be exactly what I've thought of, but whatever is coming closest to my wording, that will be the correct response. Okay, I don't want to read all the responses initially. If you want to go through all of them, just pause the video. Once you've read through all the options, you can resume. Okay, so my wording, which I have thought of in my mind, the closest response to that is B. Genetic factors play a significant role in leadership aptitude. So this is the correct answer. Let's do process of elimination also quickly. I might not get the time to do it for all the questions, but at least for a few, let's try to do it. I'm already very confident this is the right answer because this is exactly what I have thought of. But still, like, to be very sure and very cautious, I will try to eliminate the other responses just to make sure those are not the right ones. I had mentioned in my previous video also, I have put up an AP psychology video before this for the new syllabus. It's just that I didn't get the time to follow up. This time I do intend to follow up strongly with AAQ and EBQ as well. That time also I had explained this importance of process of elimination. I would like to bring it about again. When you do process of elimination, you end up revising all other concepts also, which are not directly being assessed in this question. And that is very helpful because this is just a practice session. Today they have asked you about genetic factors. Tomorrow they might ask you something related to any of the other options which are there for this answer. So if you take this opportunity to revise those options as well, it will be useful if questions come from there. You will be able to answer more confidently. So in practice sessions, always be willing to give your 100%. Practice section is not about just quickly answering and leaving it. It's about learning as much as you can. So of course, it's giving you testing practice at the same time. Just eliminate the other possibilities and make the most of these questions that you can. Many times students tell me these MCQs are very precious because it's so difficult to find MCQs for the latest syllabus. So especially in that case, since they are so precious, treat them that way. Make the most out of every MCQ. So I'll give you a demonstration of what I'm trying to say here. Let's look at the first response choice, A. Shared family environment is the primary determinant of leadership aptitude. Doesn't sound right because given the findings in this situation, why is this not right? I need to think that. If shared family environment was the primary determinant, in that case, the fraternal twins raised together should have been sharing more of their leadership aptitude because their shared environment or their experiences are exactly the same and not of the identical twins raised apart. So the results are exactly the opposite of what is being said here. This definitely cannot be the correct choice. So as I rule this out, I am becoming increasingly confident that my response is the correct one, and also I'm revising my concept of shared family environment. When I'm thinking of why is this not the correct option, I'm remembering what is shared family environment. If that was the real determinant, then what the results would have been. So tomorrow, if in the paper there is a question about shared family environment instead of heritability as the one here, in that case I will be able to answer that type of question also very easily because I've just revised my concept correctly. So this is how we make the most of MCQs. I hope with this example it becomes more clear to you. We revise not only the direct question concept being assessed, we revise the other concepts also, and that way we make our knowledge of the module even stronger. Let's look at response choice C. We are continuing with process of elimination. Fraternal twins have more competitive relationships than identical twins. This does not have anything to do with competitive relationships. This is not about how they're behaving with each other or how they're competing with each other. This is about their leadership abilities, not their competition. So, how much of abilities they share. So, again, definitely, this is not the correct option. This is like totally unrelated to the behavior that is being assessed. Let's look at option D also. Leadership aptitude is solely determined by one's genetic blueprint. This looks interesting. But if this was the case, if it was only because of genetic blueprint, then there should have been an absolute result. There shouldn't have been a comparative result or a relative result. As you can see, leadership aptitude of twins raised apart is higher than that of fraternal twins raised together. They have not indicated that it's perfect. They are not saying the concordance is 100%. If they would have made a statement like that, that for identical twins raised apart, the concordance is 100%. In every case of a twin who has high leadership aptitude, definitely the other one also has exactly the same leadership aptitude. If they would have made a statement like that, and regardless of the other conditions, like what fraternal twins are undergoing, this is the case, then we would have said it's only because of genetic blueprint. That only word, or solely, is a very strong emphasis, which is not the case here. There's nothing like 100% concordance established here. So this also cannot be the right answer. Now, did you see when I ruled out option D, what was my thought process? That is very important. Your thought process needs to keep building as you're practicing. So you will realize that my thought process was about, if this is the case, if this is true what they are saying here, then this is what the outcome should have been. That helps me to revise my concept of concordance rates, 100% sharing, and of course research methods also. These type of findings come to this sort of conclusion. So it helps me to revise unit 0 as well. So I hope you also keep on practicing in the same way. Okay, so I hope process of elimination, thinking of the answer independently before looking at the response choices, all that has become clear to you with this example. Now I'm just going to speed up a little from this point onwards. So where relevant, I will discuss a little bit about elimination and all, but not everywhere. So I hope you understand. It's to keep the video brief. Let's look at question 2. We are referring to the same scenario. Keep looking back to the scenario whenever needed. If the researchers were to find that identical twins raised in the same household show a correlation of plus 0.75 for leadership aptitude, while identical twins raised in different households show a correlation of plus 0.72, this would more likely indicate that for this trait. And then they've given the response choices. This question is coming from unit 0, correlation. So firstly, your correlation knowledge should be strong. Also, do remember correlation is a type of effect size. Effect size is also an important concept in your research methods. Yes, you can directly compare two correlations. You can directly compare two effect sizes. If one correlation is 0.75, the other is 0.72. You can say the one which is 0.75 is greater to a degree by 0.03 than 0.72. These things will help you. So your base knowledge of correlations and how their effect sizes that can be compared will help you answer this question. So, of course, this is what they are saying. For the questions also, always, at least in practice, keep making sure you've understood what is being said before coming to the response choices. So here they're simply telling us that in condition 1, identical twins and same environment, correlation is very high, the concordance is very high, compared to condition 2, identical twins raised apart. Now, what this indicates that they want us to come to. So, of course, before reading the response choices, again, it shows a very strong genetic component, because it seems the genetic sharing is much more important than family environment. The difference is very marginal. The effect size difference is only of 0.03, which is not very great. So yes, family environment does matter. That we saw in the previous case, also previous question, but not to a very strong degree. It seems genetics have a much greater influence. Otherwise, these correlations which have been reported, the difference between them should have been much larger. Okay, so keeping this in mind, let's see which can be the correct response choice here. I think the first one, A itself, because that is only what came to my mind, marginal difference. Another way of putting it is negligible effect. So that is the case here. It is clearly showing shared family environment has a very less effect. If you look at the other response choices, I think the only one which could be confusing for some students, I'll just take up that one because I won't be able to take up all of them. Some might feel that genetic expression is blocked by dissimilar environments. Just because 0.72 is lesser than 0.75, they might feel that actively different environments are causing concordance to reduce. But that would be the case. Blocking is a very strong term. That would be the case, like I said, if there would be a very large difference. That is not what is being seen. Only a very small, very negligible difference is being seen. So that is too strong a statement and untrue to be supported in this case. Just think of one thing: if you don't do such practice and directly you try to answer in the exam just by knowing the content, because some students are still having the carryover of the previous syllabus. Be honest. Do you think you'll be able to answer the questions of this type just by knowing the vocabulary? I hope you're able to see how important it is to practice. I can't emphasize enough. So I just want to remind you of that. Let's look at the next question. Again, related to the same scenario. An evolutionary psychologist reviewing this study would be most interested in which of the following questions? Let me think about it before looking at the response choices. Evolutionary psychologists. What are evolutionary psychologists interested in? How any behavior is useful for reproduction, how any behavior is useful for survival, how our ancestors have passed on any behavior to us. Something along the lines of this would be the correct response over here. So the closest one to what I'm thinking is the first choice. Again, you can pause and look at all the choices if you need to. So an evolutionary psychologist would be interested in how might a genetic predisposition for leadership have increased our ancestors' chances of survival and reproduction? All the terms have been used here: ancestors, survival, reproduction. Definitely for evolutionary psychology, this is going to be the relevant response. Students might get most confused with, I don't think, any of the ones. I think this was a little obvious. One thing which comes to my mind for this one, like one tip I can give you, you might feel that, oh, the longest response choice is the correct one, So the longest question with having the most words, I should just mark that. Just look at the previous question. This sounds silly, but I've actually had students telling me these things. The longest one tends to be the right one. So to break this myth, just look at the previous one. The longest statement was B for question 2, and that was not the right response. A was the right response. So don't resort to superficialities or silly like things like appearance of the answers to decide which is the right one. Actually do careful thinking before marking the right answer. So make sure that you have read through all the response choices and then finalized on the correct one regardless of the length of the response. These things are very dangerous, trying to find shortcuts to answer. There are no shortcuts. It might sound disappointing, but there are no shortcuts. So please don't try to look out for any. You won't find them. It's a futile search. Okay, these were the questions related to a research situation. You can take a screenshot if you need to, because the correct options I have marked, the ones I've highlighted in yellow are the correct options. So if you want to save for further review or something, you can take a screenshot and refer to them later. Let's come to the next question. Now questions 1 through 3, they were the ones for the research scenario. Now these are independent questions. Now we don't need to refer to the research scenario again. We have some application questions before we come to the data interpretation type. Okay, let's see the next one. A child who is genetically predisposed to be easily irritable and aggressive consistently evokes negative and punitive responses from his parents and teachers. This dynamic best illustrates. The first thing that comes to my mind is temperament. It seems the temperament of the child is a little negative or high temper type of child. Then when I read further, after reading about irritability and aggression, I also read that there is some response from the parents which is according to this behavior of the child. So child is behaving in a certain way, parents are responding accordingly. Normally we believe that parents decide how to behave with the child, but in this case we are seeing that the child's behavior is actively evoking some response from the parents. Where have I seen this concept? I have seen this in reciprocal determination in the environment, or another term for it is bidirectional influence. So something related to that should be then the response choices. Again, in heredity and environment, what we have learned is that a child's inherited temperament, like in this case, the child's temperament of being irritated and aggressive, is modifying the environment in the sense the parenting, which is the environmental factor, is getting influenced by this inherited nature of the child. So here we are seeing the interaction between heredity and environment. The child's inherited temperament is influencing the parenting coming from the environment by the parents. Okay, so let's see which response choice is coming closest to what I have thought of. It is B. Right? How genes and environment interact. bidirectionally. So anything to do with reciprocation or bidirection should have been the right answer, which we can see here. I hope you're seeing how when I read the questions, I try to draw the larger principles. This is like taking an inductive approach. They've given me a very specific example, like this particular child is being irritated. This particular child's parents are being punitive. But I'm trying to think of what is the larger principle coming from here. Like when I took you through it, that is what I explained. I'm also trying to think of this unit is heritability and environment. So what is the heritability aspect in this? What is the environment aspect in this? So I hope you will also read your MCQs in this way. Look at a specific MCQ, but then think of the larger principles which are being represented in that MCQ. That will remind you of which concept this MCQ is coming from. The concept will come to your mind, like in my mind it came reciprocation, bidirectionality, and that is how you come to know what the answer can be. Like many times students find it mysterious. Before looking at the response choices only, how can I know what the answer will be? I hope it is clear to you now. By thinking of inductively of which are the larger principles from which the situation is derived, you can already think of the correct answer before you look at the response choices. I don't think any of the other choices are that confusing, so I'll come to the next question. Question 5. Researchers are studying a specific gene, the DRD2 gene, which has been linked to novelty-seeking behavior. What comes to mind immediately? Candidate genes. They find that individuals with a certain variant of this gene are more likely to become avid skydivers or entrepreneurs. What comes to mind? Alleles. But only if they were raised in an environment that provided opportunities for such activities. This gene-environment interplay is best described as. So what is the genetic part here? The candidate gene, which they have inherited, DRD2, some specific allele of that has been inherited. What is the environmental part over here? That they need an opportunity to perform activities like skydiving. They're interested in it, but just because they're interested, their genes are making them predisposed towards it, does not mean that the behavior will manifest unless they have an adventurous environment also. So what is this concept known as? Again, before we look at the final answer, onning and offing, right? The gene is there, but it has to be turned on or off by environment conditions, epigenetics. So something related to turning on and off, something related to epigenetics, something related to what we can see in the last option, triggering of the genes. This is what it is about. Okay, so genetic expression being triggered by the environment is the key concept here, because very apparently a person is having adventurousness because of DRD2 gene, but they're not getting an opportunity to explore unless the environment is conducive. So genes will come into play only when they are triggered by the environment. Some students might get confused here with B, which is mutation. So I just like to rule that out, why that is not the case. Mutation is usually some damage to the gene. It is about developing some sort of disorders or tendencies towards them because the gene has usually undergone damage during the prenatal stage. This is more about inheriting specific alleles of the genes rather than mutations. So that is not the correct response here. Let's look at the next one. This is a more direct question. It is an application type, but less of a scenario is given, very minimal scenario. So sometimes questions can be of this type also. We should practice all types of questions. A psychologist working in the field of epigenetics would be most directly interested in. I think I just gave out the answer in the last question, right? So I'll mark it directly to be quick. The molecular mechanisms that genes turn genes on and off. They are called molecular mechanisms, as we have learned in the textbook, because they can be prenatal factors, they can be postnatal factors, any mechanisms, any small level factors as molecular as some proteins in the womb, which are inhibiting or allowing the expression of genes. So epigenetics, always interested in on and off triggering of genes. So that is the correct answer. I don't think any other is that confusing. Let's come to question 7. Dr. Lee hypothesizes that humans have a natural predisposition to fear snakes and spiders because such fears helped our ancestors avoid venomous bites. This hypothesis is most consistent with the perspective of, again, we just saw it some time back, like who are the researchers who are very interested in ancestors, survival, reproduction, evolutionary. Some of you may feel the questions are a little repetitive. Some of you might feel the questions are overlapping. It's bound to be because we are taking only one module at a time. We are taking only one small section of the unit at a time. So, how much will we be able to investigate into it? But still, rest assured, this is very good practice. It really strengthens your knowledge if you do module wise MCQs. In the final paper, of course, concepts will be mixed up, and you won't have repetitive or seemingly repetitive questions, but you can come to that point of practicing entire units and then all units together only when you have mastered this modular practice. So eventually we come to that also. We do unit wise practice, but this is what is making you strong, what is enabling you to do that unit wise practice. So sometimes you have to undergo things which are repetitive, can seem monotonous, though most students find it interesting, but even if it seems monotonous, it's worth it. Some students here might get confused with the first option, behavior genetics. So just remember, behavior genetics is not about survival and reproduction, unlike evolutionary perspective. It is about looking at things like candidate genes, which we were seeing in question 5, looking at individual differences that are caused because of genes, rather than looking at what makes us similar, what makes the human species similar because of genes. So it's quite much in contrast of the evolutionary perspective. So don't get confused between the terms. Make sure you know the difference between such contrasting concepts. Let's come to question 8. A study finds that adopted children's personalities are more highly correlated with the personalities of their biological parents, whom they have never met, than with the personalities of their adoptive parents who raised them. This finding highlights the importance of, similar to question 1, if children are sharing their personalities with biological parents who gave them birth, means who transmitted genes to them, but with whom they did not live, who did not give them their environment, rather than with parents who gave them their environment, adoptive parents, but did not pass on their genes to them. What does that mean? That genetics has a stronger influence on their personality than the environment. If the environment had a stronger influence, then they should have been akin to their adoptive parents, not to their biological parents. Let's come to question 9. The fact that height is influenced by the actions of many different genes working together is an example of many different genes working together. Where have we learned this concept? We've learned something about how human behaviors are very complex, so they cannot be as straightforward as one gene correlates to one behavior. It's not like localization of the brain. In fact, today, even in localization, they believe in parallel distribution. So, just like it's very difficult to say that only one part of the brain, only one specific brain structure is responsible for one behavior. In the same way, only one gene is responsible for one behavior. Is definitely not going to be the truth. So this is something we have learned in polygenetic influence. Human behaviors are highly complex, and so multiple genes contribute to any one human behavior. I think the response choice has to be in those terms only, because this is like a very definitive term that is used for this concept. Don't get confused with epigenetic influence. That is about how environment triggers genes. Like we saw in previous answers, it's not about multiple genes influencing behavior. Let's look at question 10. A behavior geneticist would be most likely to conduct a study comparing. Okay, behavior geneticists, just like we revised in one of the questions, they are interested more in what sets people apart rather than what makes them similar. Now, these are some questions where we have like an incomplete stem, and then we have like specific example type of responses. So I know we cannot think in advance, like we can't cover the response choices and already think of what would be the answer, because there are just too many possibilities of examples they could give. So in that case, we should just think of the general principle which will be reflected in the answer. That will make it easy to select. So it's not impossible to think of what is the answer. It's impossible to think of the specific example that would be then the answer. But the larger principle we can still think of. So, like I said, a behavior geneticist would be interested in looking at what makes people different rather than what makes them similar. And they are interested in specific behaviors because, after all, they are behavior geneticists. So, academic achievement of identical and fraternal twins. Academic achievement is a very specific behavior they're interested in, and differences will be seen in identical and fraternal twins. So, that is what they are interested in. If you look at the other response choices, why they would not be interested in those is actually a very broad reason. This is about genes. They are behavior geneticists. So, fraternal monozygotic twins, we know it is about genes. They either share 100% genes or they don't share. But engineers, artists, peaceful, aggressive societies, adolescents, adults, these are differences in occupations, differences in personality, differences in age. These are not differences in genes to begin with. So, why would a behavior geneticist be interested in any of these? Let's come to question 11. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is considered a fundamental organizing principle in biology and psychology because, okay, again, the wording we will not know exactly, but let's think of why the theory is considered to be fundamental. See, it is about adaptation, basically, his theory, survival of the fittest. That is why it's considered important because it can explain how the current generations have departed from previous generations, what sort of skills, abilities the current generation has, which is helping them to cope with the environment which they have inherited from their ancestors, and they have been able to maintain it despite the adversities of the environment. Basically, we just have to remember what is Darwin's theory about, what is his basic principle. Then, whichever wording comes closest to this principle that we can think of, we can mark that. So, here, like I said, it's all about adaptation, survival of the fittest. So, why the theory is important? Because B, it provides a framework for understanding how species adapt to their environment over time. Given that the environment is having new challenges as compared to previous environments, how is the current generation or the current species being able to cope with that? That is what it explains. That is its whole value. So that is being reflected in this statement. I don't think any of the other response choices are that distracting or strong. So I think this was quite obvious. Okay, so in the previous, this is the answer sheet. Whatever I've highlighted are the correct answers. I forgot to show before. These are the answers on the next sheet. In case you need to take screenshots, you can save them. Okay, let's come to the last section, which is beginning with data analysis. So again, make sure your unit 0 is strong before you come to this. Questions 12 and 13 are going to be about interpreting the scatter plot that we have in front of us. And then again 14, 15 are independent questions. So first let's deal with 12 and 13. Questions 12 to 13 refer to the following scatter plot. So in your mind, first think of correlation, scatter plot, covariables, positive, negative correlation. Let the word scatter plot prime all of that and make you ready to think of all of those things, which shows the correlation between, okay, let's identify the covariables. Covariable 1 is specific environmental stressor, like a childhood trauma. Covariable 2 is likelihood of developing a particular psychological disorder for individuals with and without a specific marker. Okay, let me think, have I understood this in my mind? What am I understanding from this? Some researchers were interested in looking at the relationship between people facing stressors like childhood trauma and all, means very specific stressors that they might have faced, difficult situations that they might have faced, and how that makes them vulnerable or more likely to develop a disorder. So most probably in my mind, they must be looking for a positive correlation, because from whatever I've learned about stress in the environment and genes, usually it's the case that if someone's faced a lot of stress, they become very likely to develop psychological disorders like depression or anxiety. So in my mind, what comes is they're looking for a positive correlation between stressors and likelihood of developing a disorder. So this is my understanding of the situation. So even before I look at the scatter plot which is given, I'm expecting some sort of upward moving trend in that. So upward moving scatters, upward moving line, because I'm expecting a positive correlation already. So this is what my mind has processed about the situation. Make sure you've thought of something before you look at the scatter plot given. Okay, now it'll be easier to understand the scatter plot because I'm fully clear on what the situation is about. Whenever there is a graph in front of us, or a table for that matter, the first thing is to look at the name of the table or the graph. Don't be in a haste. It's never wise to skip over basic steps just because, oh, I know I've done a lot of this, let me just come and quickly mark the answer. Small things can make a big difference. Patiently read. How much time does it take you to read the title of the graph or the table? 1 or 2 seconds. What are you going to lose if you do it carefully? Don't haste, read it. So the title says gene environment interaction, likelihood of disorder. Yes, so I can just check, yes, my understanding is correct. This is what they're looking for, gene environment interaction. Next thing, for a graph, always look at what is on the x-axis and the y-axis. There's a lot of misinterpretation. As obvious as the graph might seem, it looks so easy. But because students don't read what is on x and y, they assume anything of their own. They might interchange x with y. Though here it doesn't make a very big difference because it's correlation, you can interchange. But in other graphs, that's going to be very expensive for you if you're going to interchange what is being represented on which axis. So don't glide over things like this. Read carefully. X-axis is representing level of environmental stress, a low to high. So on the left side of the x-axis, I have people being represented who have faced low environmental stresses, and on the right side of the x-axis, I'm having people represented who are facing high environmental stresses. Keep explaining to yourself as you're reading, what is this graph about? Coming to y-axis, likelihood of developing the disorder, low to high. So what am I seeing on the y-axis? Risk of developing a disorder. On the lower side of the y-axis, those people are represented who are having low risk of developing the disorder. And on the upper side of the y-axis, those people are represented who are having high risk of developing the disorder. So first we read the title of any graph, then we read the axis, then we read the key. So orange scatters and orange lines are representing those people who have a genetic marker, means who have a genetic risk for the disorder. And blue scatters and blue line is representing those who are not having a genetic marker, those people who are not having a genetic risk for the disorder. Okay, so I have fully understood what is being represented where in the graph. Now, having fully understood this, let me look at the trends which are being shown. So I see an orange line which is moving sharply upwards. Considering all that I've seen about the graph, this indicates that people who have genetic markers, who have a genetic risk for developing a disorder, they are very likely to develop the disorder, as I can see on the top right corner, if the level of environmental stress is high. I'm reading that on the x-axis. And looking at the blue line, I can see there also there's a positive trend that is also going upwards. Even in that case, people who are not having a genetic risk or not having a genetic marker, even for them, their risk of developing the disorder does become high when the level of environmental stressor is high. But only when I compare both the lines, like orange and blue line, I see that the slope is not as sharp for the blue line. I see that the correlation is not very strong for those without the genetic marker. In their case, the correlation coefficient is it is lesser. The lines are representing that than what the correlation coefficient would be for the orange one with genetic marker. There's a weaker correlation in the people without a genetic marker between environmental stresses and their likelihood of developing the disorder. Then in the case of those who have a genetic marker, in their case, the correlation is very strong. After having understood this full situation, this full graph, now I will look at the questions which they have given below. Not in advance, not before understanding what the graph is about. So I will utilize my graph reading skills which I've learned in unit 0, and then only I will try to answer the questions. Now, even if you are finding it a little challenging right now, maybe you haven't seen scatter plots like this, maybe you've seen very simple, not 2 lines, only 1 line. But the principles remain the same. How you read a graph remains the same, whether it's a complex graph, a simple graph, whether it's a bar graph, line graph, doesn't matter. You always go step by step. So if you follow the steps that I have told you, why I've taken the effort to tell you about all the steps is to show you how you can read any graph. Title, axis, key, and then the symbols on the graph. If you follow this, trust me, you'll be able to understand any type of graph, even if you're seeing it for the first time. That is why it's so important to know how to go about doing things. So I hope you're able to take away that from this lesson. Also, when I explain to you, it might have seemed very lengthy to you. And again, that thing, students always come back to that thing, do I have the time to do all this in the paper? See, I'm explaining to you. I am having to tell you verbally one element I'm having to tell you. When you think in your mind, it's very quick. It doesn't take as much time for you to think as it takes me to read out and explain to you. So don't judge by that how much time it's going to take you. And even if it takes a little more time than it is taking for the other MCQs, it's well worth it. When they tell you there are 80 seconds for every MCQ, are you a robot who's going to do every MCQ in exactly 80 seconds? Of course not. In some of them, you're going to be quicker because you're very confident. So that's time which you're saving from other MCQs. You can utilize here, even if it takes you more time. Generally, it doesn't. And on an average, you have 80 seconds to answer every MCQ. It's not literally 80 seconds for each. So again, I hope you're able to see the importance of practice. I like to reiterate that this sort of practice is only what will make you quick. If today it's taking you time, tomorrow you'll be fast only if you do this practice, not otherwise. Let's look at the question now. Keep referring back. You can rewind a little into the video if you need to see the graph. Based on the scatterplot description, what is the best interpretation of the relationship between the genetic marker, the environmental stressor, and the disorder? Okay, I've already read out, right? I have already explained where the strong correlation is there, where the weak correlation is there. So D is the correct answer according to what I have explained to you. Environmental stressor has a stronger effect, like I said, stronger correlation when I was explaining. With the genetic marker, because the orange line was steeper, I interpreted that compared to those who don't have the genetic marker, the blue line which was flatter than the orange line. Okay, so that is the thing. Let me see, is any response choice confusing? I don't think. I think this is pretty straightforward in my opinion. Let's look at the next question. 13. The pattern shown in the scatter plot best illustrates the concept of. I think this is an easy mark to get. See, gene environment interaction, because there are people who are having the genetic marker and who are not having. But just because someone's having the genetic marker, it's not like they're born with the disorder. See, they've told us to look at the pattern. The pattern is not showing something like, say, 100% of those who have the genetic marker, all of them are having the disorder, right? So it's not like a flat line right at the top which shows that, oh, everybody with genetic marker, that orange line, everyone's having the disorder. Rather, very clearly, they've shown a difference between those who are having genetic marker plus stress and those who are having no genetic marker plus stress. So clearly, they've shown a gene environment interaction. I don't know what more to explain in this. Okay, so these are the answers for this page if you need to take a screenshot. Let's come to the next two questions. Those are the final two questions. They are independent of the scatter plot. So they are like the smaller application questions that we were seeing before. Let's look at question 14. A researcher claims that our tendency to enjoy high-calorie, fatty foods is an evolved adaptation because such preferences ensured our ancestors consumed sufficient energy for survival. A critic of this evolutionary explanation could most effectively challenge it by pointing out that, okay, let's understand what are they telling us here. Somehow eating high-calorie, fatty food is advantageous for survival. Again, if you've read the module carefully, they have given such examples there that our ancestors many times they had to go over days together without any food. So they would not be getting any calories from the outside. Their life was hard. They were living in the forest. There was no guarantee of daily food. So then having that high calories stored in their body, fatty food stored in their body, that would give them calories to burn when they were not having any food available to them on those days. That was the advantage they were having. So literally they could survive or remain alive because of the extra fat in their bodies. Today we have, most of us fortunately have daily food or regular food at least. So we don't need to carry over food for many days together. So today our still wanting, craving fatty food is just something we are carrying over because it gave our ancestors an advantage. That is what an evolutionary psychologist would explain it as. Now, what could be a critique of this? Again, before I see the response choices given, what criticisms have we seen of this approach? That there is no consideration of the present environment in this. It's a very reductionist approach, assuming that everything has to only be because of what ancestors have been doing, in fact overlooking very obvious things which are there in the current environment, which might be more immediate triggers or immediate reasons for behavior, and going into deeper root causes which do not have scientific backing, right? That is always the critique of evolutionary approach. So in the case of food, today there is so much promotion of fatty food, and there is so much that is advertised to tempt us into buying fatty food. That is the more obvious reason for why people want to eat fatty food rather than what our ancestors were doing. So somewhere that is being overlooked in the evolutionary perspective. Okay, so this is what comes to my mind, and the response choice which comes closest to this is C, that the explanation does not account for current environmental factors that make such food easily available. Like I gave you in the examples, marketing of such foods and easy availability in supermarkets of such food, hectic lifestyle, people don't have time to prepare their meals, so this is convenience. Such things are not being looked into by the evolutionary explanation. Some students might get confused with B. To others, it might seem obvious B is not the right answer, but some students might be thinking of obesity just because fatty food is coming, so the thought that comes to their mind is obesity. Just read the entire question. Don't get primed by a few words here and there. So just because you read the word fatty food, you think it has to do something with obesity and you mark B. You can end up being wrong if you take that approach. So just see, like I mentioned somewhere before, superficial approaches, don't go for them. Read, I understand, reason, and then answer. It's enjoyable, it makes the process enjoyable also. If you treat it like, which is the longer one, this word, that word, it makes it very boring also. Then you feel, oh, psychology is such a boring subject, because you're not taking it with the correct approach. Okay, so actually it's very interesting. Looks like it takes effort, but I find it enjoyable to read different situations and use my critical thinking. I'm sure you will also find it enjoyable if you treat it that way. And let's look at the last question. In a landmark study, identical twins separated at birth and reared in different cultures were found to have remarkably similar political attitudes and vocational interests. This finding is most directly evidence for influence of, if I go by length, I'll choose D. So I won't go by length. Okay, identical twins separated at birth and reared in different cultures. Now, similar to what we've seen before, but here it's not just about families, it's about entire cultures. So they're born in one culture, they've been put in another. Yet, despite exposure to political attitudes and vocational interests of a different culture, they still have similar cultural and vocational attitudes. Means one twin is living in one culture and another twin in an altogether different culture, and still they are showing very similar political attitudes. Brings us back to the same principle which we have seen originally. So different situation, but the same principle. Also, the principle is worded a little differently. Earlier they said something like genes are more important than the environment, or genetic influences are stronger than the environment. I don't remember the exact word. Here they've called very simply nature over nurture, right? So nature, genes over nurture, learning, cultural exposure over that. That is the correct answer. Don't get confused with the first one. Nurture over nature is not right. Here what you can do, because the wording looks very similar, translate in your mind. Nature is what? Genes, inheritance. What is nurture? Experience, exposure, environment. So read it in that way. So is this genes is more important than environment, or is it environment is more important than genes? Be sure and mark B. Okay, so these are the answers for the last page. That is for the MCQ practice today. I hope more than the specific questions, the larger strategies, ways of thinking and principles that I have explained in this video for answering MCQs has been helpful to you. I do intend to put up AAQ and EBQ as well this time. I know last time I didn't do it. The syllabus had just come in, and in a haste, I put up a video of how to answer MCQs. Then I got busy with some exams and I was not able to put the AAQ and EBQ. But this time definitely I will be following up with AAQ, EBQ videos in which I will explain to you similar strategies, how to read the AQ, how to think about the answers, the approach that I've taken for MCQ, similar approach I'll take to those videos. So do let me know if you would like to watch those videos and anything else that you would like to see in AP Psychology videos. You can leave any comments, feedback, any queries in the comments box below. If you want to contact me for tuition for AP Psychology, I also take A levels as such. So if for any psychology tuition you want to contact me, my email ID and WhatsApp contact number are in the description box and pinned comment below. You can reach me out from there. But if you have any queries or comments regarding this video or any AP Psychology videos that I've put on my channel, please leave them in the comments box below. Please do not contact me personally for questions about the videos. I will not be able to answer you. That number and that email contact ID is only for tuition query. So thank you for understanding and thank you for watching this video. I will see you again very soon. Goodbye.